Der erste Podcast ist fertig. Ich war doch ziemlich nervös und hatte fast meine gesamten Englisch-Skills vergessen. Mein erster Gast in meinem allerersten Podcast war Giorgia Robinson aus London. Sie ist semi-professionelle Radfahrerin mit einem extrem starken Mindset. Giorgia hat diese Never-Give-Up-Mentalität und sorgt damit in so manchem Radrennen sogar für Angst und Schrecken bei den männlichen Athleten. Wir haben über ihre Liebe zum Sport, Mindset, Ernährung, aber auch vor allem über die entscheidenden Unterschiede zwischen Mann und Frau im Sport gesprochen. Bei allem, dass Giorgia eine kompetitive Person ist, ist sie aber vor allem eine außergewöhnlich nette Lady. Viel Spaß beim ersten PS Update Podcast. Yeah, Giorgia, good to have you on the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, I've planned that podcast since almost 1 year, 12 months, something like that. And when I got into endurance sports, I always thought about 95% or something are male, and I'm coming from soccer, and what means the difference in soccer between men and women is so big, physical wise. I don't not the mental thing, but physical wise, which means I always thought, all right, if it's getting tough on the field or on the road or something, it felt for me, all right, male people have always an advantage. But when I see, and I see a lot of I'm into running, and but I see a lot of ladies out there, they're very tough. And the first time I met you during that company thing, I thought, all right, that girl is so badass. I never heard a story like that. And which is the first thing I want to talk about with you is, do you think that when the miles are getting more, the longer the run or the cycling thing is, the more advantage gets, or the more advantage of male in between male and female is melting down, and it's more mental thing and not a physical thing anymore? How do you feel that in cycling?
Yeah, I mean, I've read a lot about that, and over distance, like the gap does get a lot smaller between men and women, because it's kind of no longer about speed and power. It's more about the mental side of it. And obviously, everyone has a kind of expected level of fitness, but I think women are I think women are a lot better at the mental determination that is required. We're kind of, I guess in a bad way, we're kind of used to being the kind of weaker sex when it comes to sports. And like, obviously the way we are built, we're not built like men to put out a lot of power. So I think that kind of sits with you in your mind, that you want to complete something because you are female and you want to prove you want to prove something. And I also think that women have kind of, I guess, a better ability to both think about more than one thing at the same time, but also think about nothing. Like, we can kind of do what is required to get through something. And I think that a lot of women don't realize it, but have an extremely high pain threshold. I think you never really get to try it, I suppose, unless you're going, I don't know, having a baby or something along those lines. But I think that we're a sex that's built to withstand quite a lot of pain, and kind of the mental aspect of being able to withstand pain for a longer period of time probably sits better with women, especially in sport. But reading a lot about it as well gives you a lot of confidence as a woman, that like the gap does get smaller. Men go off quicker and they'll do it more, with a lot more power, but then over the length of time that is required for endurance sports, the woman closes the gap and, quite often ends up winning.
Yeah.
On a time scale.
Yeah. But how is it in cycling, if when the distance is shorter, like, getting more into sprinting, and is there still a big gap between men and women on a really high level where you are,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Like kind of short distance racing, or even riding, just kind of like group riding with friends, cycling. Men can go quicker, and they have a lot more power, and the power equals the speed. So
Gotcha.
on the flat, a man who weighs a lot more than a woman can put out more power just simply by putting their foot on the pedal, than
Yeah.
we can. So the kind of ratio, I guess, of your effort as a female is a lot higher to be able to sit with a man. If you are going to sit alongside a man, then it's going to be a lot more kind of power to weight ratio that you're going to have to put out to sit at the same speed as a heavier man. If you sit behind, slightly easier getting a bit of a draft, but to be able to hold that wheel, um, it needs, like, the speed has to remain consistent. And one thing that men are kind of better at doing than women as well is surging in power. So
Gotcha.
for like racing and stuff like that, that comes into play a lot more. All of the men's races that I kind of watch when I'm doing female racing are much faster, in terms of speed, and the power output is much higher because they're all big men.
Yeah.
And the women just, it wouldn't be fair to put the two together in something like that. I think until you get into endurance, like ultra distance stuff, it's not fair to have men competing with women. There's a lot of times where I've done races and they want the women to be on the track at the same time as the men. It does happen because women's racing is a lot smaller, but the men will always catch you up because there's
All right.
more of them.
Yeah.
And they're faster, and they're stronger, as just like biologically stronger,
Yeah.
genetically stronger. So they do catch you, which puts a lot of women off, and is kind of
Oh,
annoying.
really? As
I
a
don't.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I don't. I don't like it.
sorry. Yeah. So it's a moral thing to don't put both on the track, you mean? So a lot
Yeah,
of women get demoralized.
yeah. I don't even
Not
like
going.
it's. Yeah, I guess like demoralized is probably one way to look at it, but also like it does, it kind of puts that in your head that you know the women they're not good enough to have their own race, so we're just going to shove them on the field at the same time as the lower category men's races, which are like, they're more dangerous because the men are more inexperienced. So they're often very, very big groups of men, and that they kind of put on the field with the women, and it will put a lot of really strong and potentially successful races off racing, because why should we race with the men when all the elite men that are in the same categories as some of us elite women are allowed their own race,
All right.
but we're not. So the numbers are lower, but it's discouraging, I guess, for trying to get women into the sport.
Yeah.
So that's kind of been a bit of a problem, and most of the time the women's and the men's are separate, so you wouldn't compete against the men, which I think is right, in short distance racing. But then for long distance, kind of, it's not about speed and power, then it's absolutely fine to combine the sexes. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
don't
that's a funny thing. That it doesn't matter anymore. The longer the
know.
race is, the more miles you get in.
Yeah.
That's a funny thing. Two stories about that is, there's a girl, I told you about her, Courtney Dowater. I hope I
Mm.
spelled the name right. She's a world-class endurance athlete, and she's beating up all the male people, as you know, in 200 plus mile races. She's beating up everybody, you know. And she had a race, I don't know when it was, during the last 5 years, something. It's the Moab 240, and she was, you know, leading or winning the race for, I guess she was leading 10 hours, and the second one was a man, you know, and she
Yeah.
was beating up the whole field. Like, yeah, it's crazy. And that was the first time I was thinking about, you know, is there a, yeah, is the gap closing when the race is getting longer? Yeah. And that's a funny thing.
Yeah.
And the second thing is, I never thought about that before. I just know, I just knew, all right, a birth, because you were talking about, is tough. And I was, you know, on two of them, which is which is no fun party. But I was like, you know, I was I was thinking on both times. I was like, well, right, you're gonna die if I would be that person. I couldn't handle that. And that was the time I was thinking, all right, the girls are tougher than the men. Yeah. You know, when it's when it's getting hard, I think you can absorb more pain than man can do it, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
For most of the
Yeah.
men. Yeah. Yeah.
No, I really, I think that that's true. I think
Yeah.
for women in sports, um, I think females in sports are very different to females out of sports as well. Kind of used to, I guess, being compared to men a lot of the time, and wanting to be like men
Yeah.
a lot of the time,
Yeah.
and being surrounded by men most of the time. It's, you know, I've always been quite a tomboy, which kind of a phrase for being like a boy girl, I guess. I'm not into makeup
Gotcha.
and hair and clothes and stuff. I've always been into sports, and I'm competitive, and you know, I get on better with men as well. Like, I've always been around them, but it still does, like, not upset me, but irritate me every now and then, when I'm like, I just genetically can never be like that good. Like, it's a complete, like, it's impossible to be that good, because of the, you know, the hormones that we experience, and the way we have to train is different. So I can never kind of compete on that level. So being better than some of the men that I know
Yeah.
does fill me with a little bit of joy sometimes, because I'm like, well, against odds, like,
Yeah.
somewhere I can be good. But then obviously I bench myself against men who are kind of at the same level as me, but in the male gender. And yeah, it does get a bit soul destroying sometimes, because, you know,
Great.
it's never going to be the same. But I think females in sport, we're used to having to kind of withdraw a lot more pain than men. So,
Yeah.
and if you want to be good at your sport, you're going to have to endure a hell of a lot. So otherwise you're never going to be, you're never going to be good at it.
Yeah.
Or like, the level that you want to be, I guess. Like,
Gotcha.
being fit is not painful.
That's right. Yeah.
Somewhere along the line, there is always pain.
Yeah.
You have to kind of experience it, and then see how much you're willing to take.
Yeah.
In that sense.
But getting back one step, which is, for me, it was eye-opening. Like, you told me that before, which the hormone thing between men and women. I never thought about that. You know, that, yeah, you have special situations during the month, and that this is yeah. That you have to train different, or to get a different nutrition during that time. You know, I never thought
Yeah.
about that. So would be interesting if you would tell me
Yeah.
that again. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's always like, I don't think I appreciated the impact that, like, hormones would have on training until I started trying to train properly. And some weeks, you know, you feel really strong, everything is easy, you feel quite lean, like you can control your diet, like your blood sugar is quite good, like all of those things. And you're like, oh yeah, I wish it can last forever. And then you'll kind of wake up 2 days later and, you know, you're really bloated, you don't feel so great, like your legs are really heavy, you can't put power out. Your body goes into kind of a state of like withholding you from doing too much to kind of protect itself and conserve its energy for something else. So it's really difficult to train, you know, consistently if you don't kind of factor that in. So I guess men can kind of follow whatever structure they want, because, you know, week in, week out, they're the same. Women kind of have to follow or try to follow some sort of hormone cycle as to like when's good time to do strength training, when's a good time to do kind of the easier endurance type stuff, you know, when's a good time to race or not race. And it can have, you know, an enormous impact. And, you know, it is the way that we are, and, you know, it can be deemed unfair. And I know that a lot of women will kind of try to stop like nature taking its course in order to feel better for like racing and stuff, which isn't great. But, you know, it's something that we kind of, I guess it's just an extra complication and an extra pain.
Yeah. you see it as a bonus, right?
It kind of goes through. Yeah. So I've done so much reading about it to try and make sure that I can train effectively, but it doesn't stop me from getting kind of irritated about it. There's some weeks where, you know, I just want to eat chocolate all the time. It's not great. But, you know, it's one of those things that you kind of gotta ride through. You know, I'm not a professional athlete. I'm not paid to do it. So, you know, I'm gonna still try and enjoy it as much as I can, even though I do, you know, I do want to be as good as I can at it. So I monitor it all. I use various different apps and stuff, and I try and kind of make the best of what it is. But it does put you off racing at that time, like when you know that you're not going to be very good. And sometimes, you know, it bypasses you. It doesn't happen. And, you know, the power never goes. But
that's
sometimes
crazy.
and then sometimes
for
it
a
hits
man, you know, it's crazy. Sorry.
Sometimes it hits at a different time and you're not expecting it, and you're like, I can't put this down to anything. It's just hormones. Like, that's
but
all
how
I can
do you
think.
do it when you get registered for a race, maybe 2 weeks or something, and you feel a week before, right, shit is hitting the fan now, and I you know, I don't have power, I don't have, you know,
I've always just gone and done it. And like
that's so funny.
like,
and
I guess,
that's the difference, you know.
and I think for me, I go into racing like very much with that mindset of like, I'm not gonna know like how much I've got in the legs until I try and use them. Because I think until you get into a racing scenario, it's so hard to kind of train it to the same capacity that you would put out in a race. Like, if I have to go and race, I can put out so much more power for an hour than I could if I was just going for a ride on my own, because I'm competing and you've got the adrenaline and it's a racing environment. So I often find, like, you know, I might not be having the best time, but then because I'm in a race, I can suffer more, or I can dig deeper to find more of what I need, but then it will take me longer to recover from it. That is the only downside to racing, when you know, the body isn't in the best kind of space to race. It takes it wipes you out for a little bit longer.
Gotcha.
And that's when I know that I've kind of pushed it a bit too far, because things
But
become a lot harder.
but
Like,
the
oh,
funny thing is, these are the biggest victories you can get when it's so hard and it's so terrible, and you feel like, you can, yeah, you get crashed on that. it's
yeah,
it's the biggest victory you get when you push through that, and the time doesn't matter, I guess, on that days. It's more like,
yeah,
I did it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, it's very much, there is. I've never not finished a race.
Wow.
Like, I don't. I would just, like, I couldn't cope with the knowing that I hadn't tried.
DNF, right?
I think the only kind of event that I didn't finish was because I crashed. My bike was irrideable, and that is the only time. And I was completely distraught, like
Gotcha.
completely heartbroken. It's the most I've ever cried because of sports.
Wow.
And I kind of
How long do
that.
you need after that? It's not only the moment. It's, for me,
Yeah,
it's
it took a long
days
time
after
to
that,
kind
right?
of, yeah, it took a long time to kind of accept that that happened when I was
Yeah.
so close to the end. I was like, that's, I kind of set out not really knowing what was going to happen in that event. That was an ultra event, and kind of, you can't imagine completing that kind of distance. And then at like, so it's a 405-kilometer race,
Which is
and
pretty far.
yeah, it's pretty
Yeah.
far. And you've got to do it all in 24 hours. And I got to 372 kilometers. And
Oh my gosh.
yeah, and
That's even worse. Yeah.
it was about 1 o'clock in the morning,
Oh God.
pitch black. There's no lights. In the kind of middle of England in May, so you think it'd be warm, but it was -3. It was
Wow.
freezing. And a badger ran out in front of my bike and took my front wheel completely
Oh
out,
my God.
at about 35 kilometers an hour. Um, so I obviously came off, and it completely ruined my rear derailleur. So my
Wow.
bike wouldn't go into gear anymore, and it wouldn't cycle. I tried to ride it, um,
And your
and
mindset told you, right,
I was
put
like,
on the bike on the back and run.
it'll be fine. I was like, just keep going. Like, you'll ride it. And I got back on to try and ride it. But the entire kind of rear hanger just went into the wheel and then snapped. And I was like, yeah, okay, I've definitely broken it now. Like, I can't do anything. Like,
Yeah.
that's the end. And I think that moment is was one of my earliest kind of events in cycling. So I probably only been cycling for about a year when I did that.
Really?
And that's lived with me the whole time. I was like, I just could not, like,
Wow.
if I've started something, I just have to finish it. I'd rather not start it
Yeah.
than not complete it, is kind of the way that I see it.
The thing is,
So
if that happened 50 kilometers after the start, it's bad, but you don't you haven't invest anything, no pain, no
yeah,
nothing. You're not sore, you get out,
yeah,
and yeah,
yeah.
shitty,
No,
shout on the
I
shitty bike,
invested, yeah, like 14, 15 hours of riding.
That's
I
terrible.
was kind of about an hour away from finishing it, and it just, yeah, I was completely heartbroken by that, and never, vowed after that, was just like, I'd never give up on anything, because having it taken away from you
Yeah.
is like, it's sad. So, if you can complete something, you absolutely should, because
Yeah.
when it gets taken away from you, you have no choice. You're going to struggle with it anyway. So I think if, I can't imagine taking the ability to finish something away from myself. Even if I'm crawling over the finish line, like I will,
Yeah.
I will do it.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
that's
that
a
was a
mindset
big
thing. Yeah.
lesson. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
a big lesson. I think doing that
Exactly.
event is kind of what started me off on that journey to being better, and just constantly trying to be better at cycling. Mechanical issues and crashes and things, there's nothing you can do about it really.
Yeah.
But in terms of fitness, I was like, I want to make sure I'm always fit enough to complete these things.
Yeah.
And then obviously the mental aspect of it, I'm pretty solid in what I've got. I think I've got a lot. I
Pretty
trust
sure, yeah.
that side. Yeah, I trust that side probably a lot more than I trust my fitness ability, to be honest.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how many people tell me how fit I am or how strong I am. I don't believe it. But in terms of mental strength, I believe it. That's the thing. I believe myself. I'm like, I know I can do that because
Wow.
my brain will get me through. So.
As heartbreaking these things are, during that moment and the days after, I guess you toughen up to that. I guess your mind is getting tougher. You can get over more things. I guess the mindset of never giving up is building on that. It's not a thing which you can tell yourself, all right, I never give up. That's you can't just tell you that. It's the experience you had during that race, during all the races you have, and during that time, it evolves the mindset of never giving up, which is it's so funny. When I saw it, or when we talked to each other the first time, I was like, fuck. how how badass is she? And I love people with that mindset, never give up, or nothing or it's never enough, and not enough in terms of money wise or something, never enough of training. You can't get fit enough. That's a thing. I'm training for, I want to be that fit. If you call me out tomorrow, let's get out and go for a marathon. I don't want to prepare for it, 6 or 8 or 10 months. I want to go. I just, all right, let's get out. And that's a funny thing when you say, all right, I try to be fit all the year, all the time. I have to compete. You have to go out on your bike, and you have to be able to run 100 kilometers or something without getting without dying. But that's a mindset thing you build up during the years, I guess. When you get into cycling, when you were getting in,
when
are you doing that?
I started cycling nearly 4 years ago now.
Wow.
So it'll be 4 years in January. I bought a really rubbish bike 4 years ago because I needed an outlet, and it was something that being trapped in a gym couldn't give me, and I didn't know that it was cycling at the time. I used to swim as a child, and I swam competitively for, I don't know, about 10 years. And I quit that when I was a teenager, kind of late teens, going to university. Your life, it changes as it's not about sport. I kind of said to myself, you could go to uni and have a fun time and not think about sports and training, because you gotta get up early. You can't drink loads of alcohol with your friends. Like it was a sacrifice I wasn't willing to take for that part of my life. So I gave it up, and then I kind of turned 20, 24, 25, and it just felt like something was missing. And it was a sport. And I didn't know what to do. I was like, I don't want to swim. I've kind of done that. Running keeps destroying my knees. So I don't, I tried to run for a long time, and I'm good at it, but for short distances, my joints are just crap.
But
so
you would be the perfect female for, getting 250, 300, whatever,
yeah, like
Yeah.
I
With your
sprinted
mindset.
like really good at that, absolutely great at that. But I wanted to do something that was different. There was a challenge for me.
Yeah.
So met a guy who cycled, and he was like, just buy a bike. And I did. I don't know why. I just bought a bike, and just decided to ride it, and was, to be honest, completely petrified. Like when they say you never forget how to ride a bike, it feels like you do.
Yeah.
You first pick it back up again. And then I kind of decided to, I'll get all the kit. It was the middle of winter when I decided to buy this bike. I didn't really think about it properly. It was January. So I bought like warm clothes, and then I decided that I would try and use cleats, like clip-in pedals, which absolutely horrendous experience.
How many times you get
I
you
fell
fell
over.
over on the lights
Yeah,
or something?
I live in central London, so
Yeah.
there is traffic lights like every 10 to 15 meters, and I just crashed into so many posts, and like falling off in sheer panic. And I was determined to, I was like, people use these, like there's a way to use these things. So what I used to do is like I would ride to a place that's not that far from me, which is kind of a 5 kilometer loop.
Mhm.
And it only has a few traffic lights. So I was like, I'll ride there in my trainers, then I'll put these cleats on, and then I can cycle. So I've got, I can think about it a little bit more. So I did that for 3 or 4 times in the middle of winter at about 7 o'clock at night in the dark. So no one can see me fall off.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Alone, yeah, completely alone, and just went out and was like, I'm gonna use these damn things, like if it kills me.
Yeah.
And I just learned, and then now it's second nature to me. I cannot not ride in cleats. Like it's just so much easier to ride in clip-in shoes now, and I've got if you just said to me 4 years ago, you're going to spend £400 on a pair of cycling shoes, I would have
Wow.
laughed in your face.
Other people,
And now
they buy 2 bikes for that money.
and now I have 2 pairs of £400 cycling
Wow.
shoes, one in black and one in white.
Of course.
So yeah, like I when I decide to do something, I have to kind of do it to my best ability. So after I'd managed to conquer that, I decided to start going out on like longer distance stuff on this really heavy bike. I mean, it was like 12 kilos bike,
Wow.
had rubbish gearing. It just wasn't, it was only, I think it was 10 speed gears. It was very heavy.
Which
It
is
didn't
almost
fit me.
double.
It was too big. Yeah,
It was
almost
almost
double
double.
what I ride
Yeah.
now.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, almost double. It was very heavy. It was very clunky. It didn't fit me. It was too big. It was, if I tried to ride that now, I think I'd snap my neck because I know that what size I am on a bike.
Wow.
But it was so uncomfortable. The saddle was so uncomfortable. Like I didn't really understand why people enjoyed it. I was like, it's just the worst sport. Like everything hurts all the time.
Yeah.
But because I said I wanted to do something, I was like, I'm never going to be good at it instantly. So I kept trying. And because I have a reasonable level of cardiovascular fitness anyway, from like years of doing sports, I didn't necessarily find that element of it hard. it was more the just being sat down in that position, bent over for a really long period of time, sat on a horrible saddle, clipping in and out, everything. There's so many things to think about when you're cycling that it's a stressful thing to try and learn to do, I guess, just as a basic thing. And then climbing, used to terrify me. I'd be like, oh, it's so hard. And when I first started riding, I was probably, I don't know, like maybe 10 kilos heavier than I am now. So like everything was probably harder anyway, because I was carrying a lot more weight. And then over that kind of first year, I trained with a cycling club of boys, all boys, unsurprisingly.
Yeah.
I was the only female, and I just used to go out and quite literally like get my ass handed to me every weekend. Like I was exhausted just chasing men on bikes everywhere on a really heavy bike, being new to a sport. But it
did
made
they
me
wait for you? Like they drive a little bit slower or something, or did they get into a?
They never traveled any slower, but if we lost each other, they would stop and wait. But
right.
I'm kind of, I would just I would bury myself into the ground to try and make sure that I was not left behind.
But
so
that's the
I
best
was going
training
out,
you got, right?
Yeah. And it made me so fit so quickly. Within a year, I was, I'd lost like 10 kilos. My power ratio was so much higher. I think I probably, I went up. I lost about 10 kilos, but gained about 50 or 60 watts. So my ratio was just completely different. And I was like, well, I'm clearly going to enjoy this. So I'm going to buy a proper bike. And I went and invested. So less than a year later, I bought a £3,000 bike with 11 speed gears. It's 6.7 kilos. I absolutely loved it when I first got it. I was like, it's just so light. Like it just moves. It's great. I mean, now it feels heavy. But you get used to it.
You still drive it, or you still ride it?
I've still got it. Yeah, I've still got that bike. I've kind of upgraded bits and pieces of it now. It was my lockdown bike because I went home to my parents and I just took that bike. So I was like, nah, I'll only be there for a couple of weeks, and then I ended up being there for 5 months in the lockdown riding that bike. So I had to rebuild the whole bloody thing because it was falling apart. So it had been abused. I ride my bikes into the ground, so they both of my bikes have been kind of rebuilt from frame back up again twice.
Wow.
Because the kilometers I put through them is ridiculous. But so it's got new wheels, new handlebars, all new group set basically. It's had a new stem, like everything is new. I just kind of I love that bike and can't give it away because of what it gave me out of the sport. I use it a lot on the indoor trainer because it's more of a summer bike. But I'll probably never get rid of it because it's been crashed 3 or 4 times. It's been with me. It's carbon.
Scratches here and there.
Yeah, for a few different crashes. I think I crashed it literally twice in the first month of getting it, and I'd never crashed.
That's a good feeling, yeah.
Yeah. I was like, never crashed this crap bike that I had. But I crashed that one twice, and it survived the whole way through. It's a proper little. It's a fighter, that bike, and that's why I decided to rebuild it this year, because I was like, it deserves it because of what it's given me and the ability to do the sport. So I have 2 very similar bikes, but one is probably a bit more of my luxury bike that I then treat myself to another year later, when I decided that I kind of deserved another bike that was pretty much the same.
But
it's just hanging there.
Oh, right.
That's my nice one.
Wow.
So that's, I mean, they're both very nice bikes, but that one's about twice the price. So I
Wow.
kind of, and I find it extremely comfortable. I race on that one a lot as well, because it's got disc brakes, so it
Oh,
feels a
okay.
little bit safer
Yeah.
sometimes. It's got power meter on it, so that I can see my power when I'm outside for training. So I've kind of put a bit more structure into that bike than I ever had
Gotcha.
in the old one. So I think, yeah, I mean, it's been about 4 years, and then competitive cycling I've only been doing for about a year now.
Oh, right.
So ultra events you can kind of class as, I guess. I started those a year after I started cycling, but because of COVID, there was quite literally nothing in
Yeah.
2020,
Same over here.
which
Yeah.
was really sad. Yeah, so I got into short distance riding and racing, kind of like circuit racing, a year ago because of COVID, and was like, well, there's more chance of me being able to race if it's shorter,
Yeah.
because of the COVID rules and regulations. So I was never training to be a sprinter or a short distance cyclist. And I really didn't know what to expect. I just kind of gave it a go. And my first race, I came second, and
Wow.
I lapped 3 people. So I was like, yeah,
Wow.
maybe I am good at it.
Yeah,
um,
I'm pretty sure about that. But do you think do you think that that the point that you get from endurance to or long distances to the short sprint things, it toughens you up that much that you have an advantage, mental advantage against, all the sprinters and stuff? You're
yeah,
maybe not the fastest, but the toughest one in the field.
yeah, yeah, I think so. Often describe myself as a diesel engine because, I mean, and a lot of people are very good, but for a very short period of time.
Mhm. Okay.
Um, and I'm good for a short period of time, but I'm very good for a longer period of time.
Mhm.
My ability to hold the same amount of power is a lot longer than most people. So for me, doing an hour effort is like, it mentally seems like less of a challenge because it's quite short.
Yeah.
Um, but the thing that I obviously want to try and work on is the amount of power that I can do for a short period of time, just obviously increase it.
Yeah.
But it means that I'll keep going and I outrace a lot of people in terms of the time because I don't get as tired. And if
That's
anything, I
crazy.
often
Yeah.
get better as I keep going. For like the first kind of 10-15 minutes of a race, like, and then you kind of get into it, and then you
Yeah.
don't want it to end by the time it's finished.
Yeah.
So I think that endurance training absolutely has made me better at circuit racing than I
Yeah.
thought it would. I didn't think it would have the advantages that it does.
That's crazy.
It's just
But
made
I
me,
guess the most people will get the other way, right? From
yeah,
short
yeah,
to long
much
distance.
easier. Yeah, it's much
Yeah.
easier to train to be a short distance cyclist. Training for long distance endurance sport, people can't be bothered. Like, it takes a long time. It's something that you have to keep going at because your body has to kind of reach that space where it can, your heart rate lowers, your efficiency goes up,
Yeah.
so you can sit there for a really long time, and operate. Your body starts burning its own fat for fuel, and there's different. You can't train for that unless you give it the time.
Yeah.
So that's why I think a lot of people don't bother, is because of the time
Yeah.
that is required to be good at endurance sport.
Even in training, you have to do so much more if you are in endurance. Yeah, the training is, yeah, it's not an hour or 1.5 at the weekend. It's, yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've done a lot of, you know, throughout lockdown was a real like to train for endurance, because I was like, well, I don't know if these events are going to get cancelled or not, so I'm still going to train for it. I'm going to train for it indoors. I was doing 7 or 8 hours on an indoor trainer,
Wow.
like in
A
one
day.
go. Yeah, a day. Um,
It's a work day, right?
yeah, on a weekend, like just sat there for.
Wow.
I went and stayed with my parents. I mean, I'm nearly 30 years old, and I went home and stayed with my parents for like 4 or 5 months, and they didn't really know they knew I cycled and I do events, and I don't think they appreciated what kind of nuts I was. So I'd be like, oh, I'm gonna get up at 7. I'm gonna get on my trainer at 8. Mum's like, oh, okay, what time are you coming for lunch? Like, oh no, it'll be dinner. She's like, what? I'm like, yeah, it's gonna be like an 8 till 5 job. And she's like,
Wow.
that what? And I just go and shut myself away for like 8 or 9 hours and train.
Non-stop.
And yeah, she would come up and check that I was okay and like fill up my water bottles and
Of
stuff, which
course,
was
yeah.
great.
You're the daughter. Yeah. If my daughter would
Yeah,
do that, I would sit around her.
yeah. Let me keep going. Yeah. And
That's crazy. Yeah.
my parents, they would come in and have chats with me, and it was a nice environment to train in for that period of time, because they live in the countryside. It was a bit better than being in London. But yeah, I did it all through. And even when they put the radius kind of lockdown rules on, and I wanted to be outside, I put my trainer outside, and
Yeah.
I did it on my parents' drive, and just sat there for like 8 or 9 hours. My dad would go in and out like
Wow.
4 or 5 times a day, and I'd still be there. He was like, "You're just absolutely nuts." But they're super they're super supportive, and they know the kind of person that I am, in that if I say I'm going to do it, I have to do it. So they
Great.
don't ever kind of discourage me from doing something,
Have you seen
unless
your,
they think it's bad for my health. Basically,
yeah.
that's the time that
Okay.
they've expressed concern. Is when I first started cycling, obviously I'm a lot more efficient now than I was then. But I lost a lot of weight and I was too thin, and I didn't really know how much you had to eat. And I
You
got
just did it.
quite just weak. Yeah, well, I'm quite weak. And it wasn't good. Whereas now I'm a lot more efficient, and I've not kind of gained all of that weight back in fat, but I've gained it back in muscle.
Hmm.
So I gained 4 or 5 kilos back, but in
Which is
muscle.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's okay to like they're all right with it now, as long as everything's still operating, because that's the danger as well with being a woman. If body fat is too low, it's not good for your overall health. So there's various things, I guess, that they've kind of tried to step in along the way, but most of the time they're like, it's Giorgia, like you can't tell her no.
Right.
Like, just let her go.
But when you were at in front of the house, did you see the neighbors putting away the curtains, looking, all right, that crazy girl is still on the bike?
Yeah, people would be like walking their dogs like a few times a day, and I'd still be there, like just still sat there. Like, who are you? Like, what are you doing? I'm
Wow.
like, oh, I'm their daughter, and I'm training for an event, and I just have to sit here all day. And then when we were allowed to go back out further from our homes, then I was back out on my bike on my own, and for hours and hours and hours just alone. And I think,
Yeah.
to be honest, the lockdown, it was terrible, and it hasn't been a fun experience for anyone, but it really has taught me that I am absolutely fine on my own for
Yeah.
hours doing that sport. Like, I don't need anyone else.
Mhm.
And that kind of proved to me that like cycling is something that I do for myself.
Yeah.
Like, it's not something that I do to be social. Even though I do that, like, it's not something that I do for anybody else
Yeah.
apart from me. So I think, whilst it was a really bad time, it taught me that lesson and made me kind of, I guess, fall in love with it a little bit more, because I was like,
Yeah.
this really is like the only thing that I enjoy at this time when everything else is stripped away from you. So it was like, I was so thankful, I guess, for having something that I didn't realize was like such a big part of my life until I had nothing else.
Yeah.
And that kind of, you know, made me realize that I am a cyclist. Like,
Wow.
to be, you know, to feel as like connected to something as I do with cycling, you know, made me realize that, you know, I was, you know, and I am a cyclist, and I do it for
Wow.
me. And, you know, riding bicycles does play a huge part in who I am. And whether that's kind of indoors or outdoors, whatever. It's who I am. It's part of who I am now. And if it was taken away from me, I genuinely don't know what I would do without it now. It's kind of one of those things where I'm like, when there's nothing else left in the world, as long as I've got a bike, then I'll be fine. Because I've kind of been there. I've kind of been there with lockdown. So like I know that that's all I, you know, I could get rid of my 400-pound shoes or maybe, but but you know, as long as I've got that, then I'm living, because that's, you know, that is life, you know, is enjoying. And that's
It's so
cycling is
funny.
very,
You know, it's so funny to hear somebody talking about in that intention about his hobby, you know, you're doing that beside your job, but to call it as the thing, like, you know, the main thing I would do for the rest of my life, if there's only one thing I can do. That's so intense, because I guess, first of all, the most of the people can't be alone. They haven't learned to be alone, you know. They don't enjoy to be alone. They always need people around them. If they're running, if they're cycling, if they're, you know, doing things, they can't be alone. And that's the first thing, you know, when you learn that, it's so much, it's so much more than, you know, it's so much more than money, or getting your whatever from your job or something. It's, you know, it's life filling. It's a life filling moment, I guess. And the other thing is to find something, and I'm pretty sure most of the people didn't find even a hobby which they do, you know, with so much intensity, or, you know, I guess they didn't found anything what they love, you know. And you're just cycling for 4 years, and you're so deep in that, and just so, it's so much intensity when you, or it's so intense when you talk about that. It's, I feel it, and I love it. And I wish for so many people that they find a hobby, even if it's, you know, just running a mile, or, you know, getting endurance, whatever. That's pretty cool. I like that. So I just no, it's fun, because, you know, when I got into endurance running, which started with a half marathon and a marathon and a little bit more and a little bit more, I thought, all right, are you crazy? Are you just one of that? And to feel, all right, there's more. A lot of people ask me, all right, why isn't a marathon enough? And I always think, all right, after, you know, I had a 85K run before a couple of months, and the first day after that run, I thought, all right, what's next? And what's the next thing you can do? And I see so many races and so many competitions, and I thought, I always think, all right, you have to do this, and you have to Transalpine, and you have to do this and that. And most of the time I feel like, all right, you're crazy, you're different than all the other people. But to hear somebody like you talking about a 400-mile race, like, a 400K race, like, this is fun, and this is, this is the ultimate competition. This feels so good for me,
Mm.
because I know I'm I'm not
Yeah,
alone
you're
on that
not
planet.
alone.
Right.
No,
So yeah.
there is a good group, I think, of people out there in the world now that I think will kind of openly admit to loving their sport as much as they do.
Yeah.
And because me and you, we're not paid to do our sport. Like, you
Yeah.
have to almost love it more
Yeah.
than a professional athlete to go out and do it for free and put yourself through all of that
Just for you.
pain. And yeah, just for me. And like
Yeah.
I always, people are always telling me that I'm nuts, and why the hell do you want to get up at 5 o'clock every morning and cycle for 2 hours before you walk to work, and then work for a whole day and then walk home again?
Yeah.
I'm like,
It doesn't make sense.
I love it. Yeah, like, why would I not? Like, I just wouldn't feel right if I didn't do that. It gives me my purpose, and my bike is, it's one of those things that, quite often people say, like, you can be anywhere with said person because it feels like home. And that's kind of like what you get with the bike, is like, I could be anywhere with my bike and I could make it life or make it home, because then I've got that part of me that gives me all of those things that I need out of, like, every day. Like, I don't need anything else, but that I do need to cycle.
Wow.
Like,
That's
I think
so big. Yeah.
yeah, and when I don't, I just don't feel right. Like, I just, I take rest. It is a valuable thing.
Yeah.
But it's not something that I could take a long period of time away from easily, that's for sure. So it's definitely become a very strong, like, bond, I guess, I have with cycling. And the benefits that obviously it keeps me fit, which is great. But just what you can achieve, like, it's never going to end. Like, it's not, you work and then you retire, and it does kind of end somewhere. But it's never going to end for cycling. Like, it's, if anything, the challenges get harder because you're going to get older and you're going to have children. If you go down that route, like, it's it's going to get harder, but for a whole host of different reasons. But
Of course.
I'm never going to give it up, if I don't have to. Yeah, I mean, and knowing what I'm like when I can't finish something, it's just never.
And and the thing is, you still can do it with your kids, and you still can do it when you're old, and maybe not that quick anymore, but you can do it, maybe go more far, or
I would go back into ultra for sure. Kind of ultra stuff, and kind of probably stop doing. I mean, you can do, they do masters racing over here, which is 40 plus. And that's still pretty competitive. I think until you kind of get over like 60, then it kind of becomes a little bit like, oh, you probably have to leave the racing scene. A little bit, you probably don't want to be putting yourself against 40-year-olds anymore when you're 60. So I was like, I'm 30 in a couple of months. Like, I've sort of half of my life left to race, and then I can just go into, do like the trans Pennines and stuff like that. Like, so I'll be retired.
Yeah.
Go
But
off
is
for
there
days.